Hey, what's up? This is Aristocracy here. We are truly in the age of fashion microtrends, uniform-like subcultures which go from unknown to all over the place in a very short period of time. Over the last month or so, despite not being a new trend, one has generated more conversation than any other. Old money, stealth wealth, or quiet luxury is the apparent art of wearing premium clothing where timeless style, low branding, and high product quality are put first with the intention of dressing in a very effortless way, mimicking the aesthetic of generationally wealthy people with no need to communicate how much money they have. Despite this style genuinely being purchased more, it's being criticized by fashion commentators for being an extremely stupid, short-lived trend which represents just how far people are willing to sink for the sake of wearing something new.
I do not like the old money aesthetic, it pisses me off.
It's true that online old money comes across as a dumb trend, but what makes it uniquely cringe? And perhaps more interestingly, are there culturally significant concepts at its core, which might actually be useful to us even if we don't want to engage in billionaire cosplay? Let's dive in. At face value, old money is almost an inversion of the glamorization of workwear and working class aesthetics that we talked about in a recent video. Old money presents an idyllic view of generational wealth and leisure time. In old money inspiration, expect to see plenty of fluffy haired white boys sitting around wearing nice shirts, sipping champagne, relaxing on the yacht, and just generally enjoying that time that us normal people have to spend working so we don't get kicked out of our homes. This look is certainly an ideal, but we should note that the old money aesthetic is essentially a stereotype of how the generationally wealthy behave. And in fact, we can find plenty of examples of billionaires not dressing in this style. We have codified old money culture through online content and most recently the new season of Succession into this particular look though. In 2023, this represents the uniform of old money. With online content gaining far more visibility than the real world, it's the simulacra, the representation that wins out against reality. So although the old money aesthetic might not be literally representative of what old money is actually wearing, for this video I still think it's appropriate to talk about the old money aesthetic as representative of the ultra rich. My first instinct was to denounce the whole trend as pure aspiration for us normal people to look and put on the uniform of the ultra rich, going out LARPing as Bezos and the gang. Even though old money is something by definition you can't attain, you have to be born into it. In fact, even the old money lifestyle is looking pretty out of reach. We can't fly private to Italy for a beautiful dinner on the veranda, but we can dress kind of like we do. Close enough, I think, as I tuck into Chef Boyardee's finest. That lifestyle is super appealing to anyone grinding out a 9 to 5 to keep the lights on, especially at the moment where a lot of rich countries are faced with higher than normal inflation and wage stagnation, meaning that people are literally getting less wealthy. The dream of a life of leisure seems further away, and thus we want to imitate it more. We want a piece of that more. That could drive people to want to imitate a rich aesthetic, but we also know that the way people dress is influenced by cultural and economic trends. The now debated hemline index notes a changing length in women's skirts from more revealing to demure as financial situations worsen. Post-pandemic mass adoption of comfy clothing was a massive cultural shift. So could the old money aesthetic be a similar thing? Yes, okay, it's a style based around expensive clothing, but also stuff which is pretty reserved, it's understated, it's designed to be trend immune. Could all of those things be responses to the current cultural climate? Is it really that simple though? As we talked about in the workwear video, I think that style has a lot more to it than pure class tourism, and I think the same thing applies here. There are interesting things about the popularity of old money and how it pertains to contemporary fashion culture. It's just that sweet delicious core hidden underneath a crunchy exterior shell of bad fits, cringe, and TikTokification. I'm not just talking about how the old money aesthetic is typically kind of boring. It feels like it's been watered down now to the point where anyone wearing a shirt and chinos is old money. And it's also not just about the fact that the background, the lifestyle side of things, is doing a little bit of the heavy lifting in making this stuff seem more glamorous. I think it can be interesting and it can look cool. However, old money suffers a unique problem which makes looking at and creating content about it come across as inauthentic and cringe. The old money aesthetic suffers the fashion equivalent of the observer effect. Observing an experiment changes its outcome. Observing old money content changes our perception of that content and the brands and clothing inside it. Why? Well, fashion content is inherently about glamorizing and showcasing specific items of clothing, but the if you know appeal and the stealth element of old money is pretty much about the exact opposite of that. So as soon as you start making content showing off your Loro Piana polo shirt or twirling around in your nice little Celine skirt, even giving people lists of the best old money brands or items of clothing, well, you've turned quiet luxury into loud luxury. The perceived need to do this is particularly strong with the old money aesthetic because aesthetically the clothing is very plain. We're talking brands like Loro Piana, Brunello Cucinelli, Celine, The Row. To those not in the know, those kinds of outfits are just not that exciting. You have to tell people in the content to make sure they get it. Sell the benefit to them so that they interact with it. If I just show a bunch of images like this with no context, people are probably going to scroll on past. Social media content necessitates me introducing it as, why is this secretly the uniform of the ultra rich? Let me explain. And of course, the very act of doing this erases the clothing's old money credentials. The more people try to engage with old money, the less old money it seems. There's a very fun irony that the top tier old money brands, I think Loro Piana and Brunello Cucinelli specifically, have now been talked about and content about them repeated so much on social media as this is the uniform of old money, or this is what stealth wealth, or this is what quiet luxury looks like.
The number one brand that ridiculously rich people love to wear has never looked better, and here's why.
And now, everyone knows about them. We took the quiet part of quiet luxury out back and shot it by talking about it far more than these brands' original client base ever did. 5 years ago, if someone said they were wearing Loro Piana, that might mean absolutely nothing to a casual fashion fan, but now it's more likely for people to think, oh, that's that expensive brand, well, you must be very wealthy. By being the most old money brands, paradoxically, they are now less old money and more likely to be picked up by the nouveau riche looking for something authentic or luxurious, or just the next trend in expensive clothing. No item does this better than the old money logo baseball cap, the ultimate quiet luxury paradox. This $500 cap, yep, I'm sure has the same quality and craftsmanship as the brand's other products, but it also proudly displays the logo which says, I have generational wealth, I am old money, I don't need to show off how wealthy I am. No doubt these are people who want to take part in the old money trend by buying something which is as overtly old money as possible. And before you say no one's buying that, right now this is on the top sellers page of Matches Fashion. In fact, multiple retailers are putting these sorts of quiet luxury brands in their shortlist of designers, suggesting that these are the exact things that people are looking for right now. Like it or not, e-commerce suggests that these brands are trending. Yes, we could criticize buyers of a hat like this for fundamentally misunderstanding what old money is all about, instead purchasing something which is closer to premium mediocre. What I prefer to focus on, however, is just how effectively the old money logo hat erases the stealth wealth credentials of those brands. It raises their profile, it associates them with people trying to communicate their wealth rather than hide it. It's exactly the same sort of thing of the Burberry hat being associated with the lowest strata of British social class in the early 2000s, something which was so pervasive that that image still exists today. The old money aesthetic, I would argue though, is more item-based than brand-based. Of course, the label is important to some extent, but also it's important to have those defining characteristics a little bit more tucked away. Succession seems to have become the poster child of this look, and even in the show, a Burberry bag becomes the subject of derision, where other characters wear less distinctive Burberry items with impunity. Either way, is there a more satisfying reclamation than gate-kept, trend-immune clothing worn only by the ultra-rich, turning into a TikTok trend which, after being cool, will no doubt at some point become uncool? The look is intended to say, you can never be us because we're far too cultured and tasteful, etc. for you. But the aesthetic, the adoption of this trend is saying, well, actually, we can do that. We know your secrets, we know all the brands that you like to wear, we can just copy exactly this thing which is associated with you and you've tried to keep away from us. It's ours now. I think that sort of reclamation, even turning quiet or stealth brands into something flex-worthy, like with those Loro Piana or Brunello caps that we saw earlier, is kind of an interesting idea. It makes this concept worthy of thought in the same way as upper and middle class people adopting workwear uniforms as their clothing of choice. The proliferation of old money aesthetics and the endless discussion in online articles is a lowering of the gate into this hitherto unseen world. Now we move into the real important part of this video, which I referenced in the introduction. What is behind this aesthetic which hints at actual value, not just cringe social media trend? Let's investigate the ethos and core concept of what we understand old money to be. Approaching old money conceptually, not just aesthetically, reveals something far more enduring and significant than just another fashion trend. These brands and specific pieces I've mentioned hinge themselves on, yes, a timeless aesthetic with minimal branding which conceivably go under the radar as luxury items. Let's forget about the exact look that results and the fact that people are consuming these as a trend, and really look at the reason for why people buy into this stuff. What is the value behind these items? These brands market themselves as being luxurious, not just because of the logo, but the construction, the craftsmanship, the quality, the attention to detail, the enduring nature of clothing, allowing it to be relevant for a long time, and the high-end, high-quality materials allowing it to survive many years in your wardrobe. It's trend immune, it's crafted for long-term use. All of these things are steeped in countercultural appeal. They are very different to mainstream trends designed to be flashy, short-lived, distinctive, created for social media engagement. Does old money conceptually represent a response to those things, a desire to consume with more intention, to avoid the overtly flashy or distinctive items in favor of something which does go under the radar and is far more timeless? You are willingly consuming something very expensive when a clear, cheaper alternative exists because of these supposed tactile qualities which only offline and only in person can you truly understand, experience, and appreciate. And to bring the aspirational lifestyle into things, to live in a way fundamentally disconnected from the online world that's firmly latched on to our dopamine-addicted brains. With these characteristics in mind, it's hard not to compare the old money aesthetic at a conceptual level to the demand for vinyl, film cameras, old cars, all of that kind of thing which we've discussed in previous videos. The old money aesthetic, or the clothing of old money conceptually, is like the clothing equivalent of vinyl. It's tactile, it's expensive, it's physical, it's analog. Even though TikTok and other social content fundamentally misrepresents old money, or at least dilutes the aesthetic down to just put a shirt on, I think its true popularity is not hinged on that aesthetic, but the countercultural nature, the slow fashion, the conscious consumption, which kind of lies at its core somewhere. Even if people's actual consumption patterns don't reflect that, I do feel like that's the thing people want to buy into. And it is strangely enduring better than other contemporary trends. Yes, people seem to be talking about it a lot right now for some reason, but you can go back pretty much exactly 1 year and people were also talking about old money. It was all over the place then. You can even go even further back. Before the logo mania of the mid-2010s, people were wearing brands like APC and Common Project, those things which were kind of elevated basics. It's your regular clothing, but it has this higher quality, tactile nature to it, which only people in the know will understand. It has those little markers and identifiers that only other fashion connoisseurs are going to recognize. For things with ostensibly such middle-of-the-road aesthetics, it has a surprising amount of staying power. It says to me, there must be something else here that isn't just the look. This is, in fact, the more I thought about it, exactly the same concept that we've been talking about on the channel for years. I mean, think about expensive but high-quality clothing designed to be atemporal rather than trendy. Clothing which uses minimal branding elements but includes distinctive design elements recognizable only by those in the know. Clothing with luxury materials unavailable in cheaper alternatives. Clothing which was once unknown to all but a select in-group but has recently gained mainstream recognition and appeal. oh look, we're talking about acronym and other technical fashion brands. An observation around this area though, Valence is pretty much the most old money brand in this space, and yet sadly has been left out of the old money conversation despite conceptually fitting into the idea pretty well. The long running joke is that you pay more money for a premium brand in the form of Arc'teryx, and then you pay even more money to take all the branding off. It's also fallen out of favour in fashion circles generally. Fans have lamented the fact that Valence has kind of awkwardly not quite totally changed itself up and innovated and moved with the times, but neither has it purely stuck to the classics and exactly the thing that it was known for. It's kind of in this awkward in-between space. The real interesting stuff is now the women's line. It's kind of a shame. Valence feels like the culmination of what people might be looking for with the old money aesthetic, but it just feels like the brand is not in a great place right now. The popularity of old money might feel stupid aesthetically, and I suppose it kind of is, but its existence and enduring popularity hints at some of those more universal themes which I think people are still after. Not just aspirational adoption of another class's uniform, but the desire to consume things which outlast those fleeting microtrends. These themes give old money, a trend which seems to be particularly uninteresting, a perverse amount of staying power. A trend that presents as let's cosplay rich people, but is rooted in people's tiredness with fast fashion, overconsumption, and terminally online cultural discourse. The reality and the final irony, I suppose, is that most people are just going to engage with this in the same way as any other trend, either buying the cheap fast fashion alternatives to this clothing, a fundamental error, or buying items from luxury brands which say old money the loudest. Again, a pretty fundamental error. In both occasions, those things become trend-driven items. People want to present themselves as being very countercultural, conscious consumption, all of those things, but in fact, just succumbing to the same problems as everyone else. However, I'd like to hope some will take those concepts to heart. Maybe it will encourage them to purchase some more plain-looking or trend-immune items of clothing which people can get a lot of wear out of over many years because they do subvert or last over multiple trends. That's where I stand on this look. I have to admit it's not my favourite aesthetic, but I do feel like there's a little bit more behind it than people give it credit for, and I think there's a reason why it has kind of hung around this sort of nebulous idea which is hiding there, which maybe people aren't even consciously engaging with, but they have this subconscious thought of, wow, this lifestyle, this type of clothing really appeals to me. And I think it's some of those ideas which are at the root of that appeal. Would love to know what you think though. Is there anything aesthetically or conceptually that's worth paying attention to here? Or are you in favour of totally skipping this in favour of something which aligns a little better with the way that you like to think about clothing? Maybe you love the idea of quiet luxury. If you were going to spend a lot of money on something, to buy something which is less trendy and in fact doesn't really make clear how expensive it is and where it's from. Or maybe loud luxury appeals a lot more to you. You want the idea of wearing the full Gucci suit so you can really show off, you can get the flex on. If you enjoyed looking through this topic though, would massively appreciate it if you give it a like. It takes like 2 seconds and believe me, it does massively help out the channel. And of course, I'll be back very soon with another video.